Only minutes after 21-year-old Reagan Tokes walked out of Bodega restaurant where she worked as a waitress,
I knew she was getting off at 9 o'clock.
her father knew something was wrong.
She told me she would call me. The phone call never came.
2 hours earlier, Toby Tokes, who lived more than 1,000 miles away, had texted his daughter.
I didn't realize she was working. She texted me back. She said, "Dad, I can't talk right now, but I will call you when I leave tonight."
When she didn't call, panic set in.
I was actually frantically trying to get a hold of her that evening until about 2 in the morning.
But Toby would never talk to his daughter again. And instead of planning her upcoming college graduation, her family would soon be planning her funeral.
In my opinion, there's not enough justice for what happened to Reagan.
Growing up, there was never a doubt where Reagan Tokes would go to college.
She wanted to go to the Ohio State University. That was the only place she wanted to go.
Lisa McCrary-Tokes says becoming a Buckeye was her daughter's lifelong dream, and nothing was going to stand in her way.
And I remember when it came time to do the college applications and everything, and I said, "Reg, don't you think that we need to broaden our horizons and maybe consider some other options?"
But Reagan didn't need any other options.
She looked at me and she was like, "Mom, this is the school I want, and don't worry, I'm gonna get in."
Reagan was right.
She was admitted into the pre-med program there. She had excellent grades.
The summer before Reagan started college, a job opportunity took the Tokes family from Ohio to Parkland, Florida. Reagan didn't make the move with mom, dad, and sister Mackenzie.
There was no point for her to move just to go right back to Ohio.
Despite the distance between them, Reagan remained in constant contact with her parents.
I always considered myself very lucky that she wanted to talk to me every day.
So the one night Reagan didn't call when she said she would, her parents were up half the night trying to reach her.
Reagan's phone, it was ringing and ringing and ringing, and messages were being delivered, and then about 2 in the morning it went dead.
It was a long, restless night for the Tokes.
I knew that night something was wrong. I told Lisa that I was concerned.
There was a sense that something didn't feel right. I was unsettled.
The next morning, Reagan's phone was still dead. That's when her sister Mackenzie called her roommate.
She was just like, "No, I haven't seen her today. I'll go check her room now." She was like, "Yeah, her bed's still made, and it looks like she's not here, and her book bag's still here with everything in it, and her laptop hasn't been touched."
Then I knew for certain something was wrong.
The dread would only increase with a phone call to the university. Lisa learns her daughter never made it to class that morning.
I immediately called police, but because I was not the last person to have seen her, I was not allowed to file a missing persons report.
So who was able to file it?
Actually, the co-workers at the restaurant had to do it.
While waiting, Mackenzie took to social media and started sending out posts like this, asking anyone who had seen her sister to please contact their family.
I was hesitant to do it because I knew once I did it, then it was officially real. Like, she was missing.
Reagan's roommates and friends also flooded social media with her picture. News of a missing Ohio State student quickly went viral.
Newspapers and television stations had gotten my number and started calling me.
But before searchers could even begin, Reagan's parents get the phone call no parent should ever have to answer.
They found her at a Metro Park at about 12 noon that day.
Reagan Tokes' nude body found in a park about 2 miles from her work. The ambitious college student was shot twice in the head.
To even wrap your head around hearing what they were telling us, it was like you were having an out-of-body experience.
A man walking through the park spotted Reagan's lifeless body.
At first, what he told us is he thought it was a mannequin laying in the field. And as he walked up a little bit closer, he realized that it was a human being.
Detective Rick Forney was one of the first investigators on the scene.
We did not have any idea who she was at that time.
But her identity didn't remain a mystery for long.
As the investigation continued, we get a call from Columbus Police Department that they are taking a report from some OSU students who are reporting their friend missing that did not return home from work the previous evening.
And the roommates apparently told the police there were two very important things that made it clear way before the coroner even got there.
Correct.
One was a necklace on the body matching Reagan's. Another, a tiny tattoo on her side.
What kind of a tattoo did she have?
It was just a little circle, no more than the size of a $50. And her roommates told us that to her it meant karma.
Who would want Reagan Tokes dead? That question and fear quickly spread like wildfire through the community. Her murder was the last in a string of violent attacks near Ohio State University.
People started wondering if her going missing was related to the other criminal incidences of people being robbed and brutalized. People were really scared.
In early 2017, Reagan Tokes was enjoying her last semester at Ohio State University, a school her dad, Toby, says she dreamed of attending her entire life.
When Reagan was a little girl, I'd take her to the football games with me, and her love of Ohio State University sprouted from that.
She was a little Buckeye from the beginning.
She was.
Reagan loved her time at OSU, but she was looking forward to her upcoming graduation. This final tweet from the college senior, an expression of her excitement. Today my dad emailed me diploma frames and told me to pick one out, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't tear up. The psychology major already had big plans for life after college.
She had her eye on an opportunity at the Cleveland Clinic to get into her degree. We had already talked about, finding a home for her up there.
But the move from Columbus to Cleveland would never happen. One night after leaving her waitressing job at Bodega restaurant, Reagan vanished. The next day, her nude and bullet-riddled body was found in a nearby park.
I have never seen the community so outraged at a criminal incident to the extent they were when it came to Reagan Tokes' death.
Kristen Boggs is a state representative for Ohio's 18th district, the same area where Reagan was found dead. She says a string of violent robberies in her district had people terrified and wondering if it was the same attacker. Had he become emboldened by his crime spree and now started killing?
At first you think it's just a one-off situation, and then it happened again, and people wonder if the two incidents are connected, and then it happens again, and people wonder, now is there someone that's looking to commit crime in this particular area?
Cops were also wondering the same thing. Detective Rick Forney says finding Reagan's killer was their #1 priority.
We immediately began searching the area, searching the park for any type of clues. We searched all the trash cans, all of the restrooms, any type of building that was out there for any type of evidence that would have been left behind. She didn't have any clothes on, so we were looking for any type of clothing.
But a search of the park turns up nothing.
Where do you take the case from there?
Her car was reported stolen as well, and we needed to recover the car to hopefully find any type of evidence that would have been inside the car.
The next day, Reagan's Acura was found on the southeast side of Columbus, about 10 miles from the park.
Our detectives immediately went out there and we towed the car to a secure location.
The car yields a critical clue. Someone had clearly tried setting the vehicle on fire unsuccessfully. Inside, cops were about to find all the evidence they'd need to make an arrest.
A cigarette butt was recovered. Also inside the car was a gas can.
Within hours, detectives learn a similar gas can had been purchased at a nearby store the same night Reagan went missing. They quickly obtain a photograph of the man who bought it.
We didn't know if it was just a random person buying a gas can, the exact same type of gas can, or if it was our killer.
At this point, do you have any suspects?
No, none.
When does that change?
When we got the DNA hit from the cigarette butt that was located in Reagan's car.
Ohio's Bureau of Criminal Investigation quickly makes a match with the DNA found on the cigarette butt. It belongs to Brian Lee Goldsby, the same man seen in the photograph buying the gas can.
Tell me about your recollection of the first time you met Brian Goldsby.
I looked at him in his eyes and I saw pure evil.
Lieutenant Brian Davidson says Goldsby's DNA was on file for a very good reason. Goldsby was a registered sex offender, first arrested back in 2010.
What did he do?
He actually had come up behind a female as she was exiting her vehicle and put a knife to her, and he forced her to perform oral sex on him.
The entire assault took place in front of the woman's 2-year-old son.
She actually had to put her hands over the child's face so that he wouldn't see what was going on.
And that's not even the worst of it.
She was also pregnant.
Her due date just a few weeks away.
So it had been difficult for her to get out of the car and try to run, but she did think about that.
After performing oral sex on him, Brian Goldsby forces the pregnant woman to drive him around town, stopping at a couple of ATMs to withdraw money. He then made her drive him to her house.
He entered her apartment, again forced her to perform oral sex on him. Again, and then he forced her to brush her teeth and to spit and everything so that
there'd be no DNA.
And then at the end, before he left, he stole her DVD player that was still in a box.
A tip quickly leads to Goldsby's arrest, and DNA provided his guilt.
We had collected DNA from the parking lot where the first sexual assault had taken place. We also collected some evidence from the bedroom of her apartment.
Fearing for her life, the life of her young son and unborn baby, the pregnant victim refused to testify against Goldsby. So instead of a trial, Goldsby accepted a plea deal.
We had originally charged him with 2 armed robberies, 3 kidnappings, and a rape. And he pled guilty to an armed robbery and an attempted rape.
Those lesser charges meant Goldsby was only sentenced to 6 years behind bars. Turns out he was released from prison just 3 months before Reagan Tokes' murder.
I didn't even realize he was out of prison.
The DNA match to Brian Goldsby from the cigarette in Reagan's car was enough for cops to arrest him a second time.
He was in that car at some point in time to leave a cigarette butt behind.
Rick Forney had made the arrest and interrogated Brian Goldsby on the previous violent rape.
I couldn't believe it was him again.
And it was about to be deja vu for the detective.
And the more honest you are, the better it's going to be.
Less than 48 hours after Reagan Tokes' body was found in a park in Grove City, Ohio, Brian Goldsby was arrested. Cops found DNA on a cigarette butt in her car matching his.
At that time, we still can't prove that he is the one that killed her, but he was in that car at some point.
The registered sex offender was well known to investigators.
You don't forget when he rapes a pregnant lady. It just doesn't happen.
Lieutenant Brian Davidson says Goldsby served 6 years in prison after pleading guilty to armed robbery and attempted rape. He likely would have received a longer sentence, but the pregnant rape victim wouldn't testify in court.
She was scared. She didn't know what else he would be capable of.
Cops now felt he was capable of murder. Goldsby is arrested having only been out of prison for 3 months. He was living in a court-ordered group home.
There's a midway point for people who get out of prison to stay that doesn't have anywhere else to go.
Detective Rick Forney interrogated Goldsby following the rape of the pregnant woman.
Will you tell me the truth on why you took that money from that lady a few weeks ago?
7 years later, he's sitting directly across the table from the convicted sex offender again.
Tell me the truth. Where were you Wednesday?
Did he remember you?
He did not.
Brian, you're not here by accident. You're here because we have a pretty good amount of evidence on what happened.
Much of that evidence is in a folder sitting right in front of Goldsby, and it's making him very nervous.
What's up with this stuff? I know that y'all's gonna pay for it.
As we started going, I would give him a little bit of information, and then he would give us a little bit of information.
Oh, how did y'all even know to look for me?
DNA from the car.
My DNA?
Yep. Tell me the truth.
Okay.
You have a cigarette butt in there.
Right away, Brian Goldsby admits he was in Reagan's car the night she was killed.
What was her reaction when he got in the car with her? Okay, and you told her you wanted what?
Because she didn't have any cash on her, Goldsby says he forced Reagan to drive to several ATMs attempting to make withdrawals. Cops already knew they had the ATM receipts and photos from the banks.
The video was very poor, but you could see somebody in the background in the passenger seat of Reagan's car.
What Goldsby didn't know is that cops couldn't clearly make out if it was him in the photos, but they continue to shake him for information.
What does that look like?
Anything that's all. How'd you get her car? Did you? Nothing. I just asked her over the door. She opened the door.
No way. No way, man.
If he didn't have a gun as he claims, detectives ask what kept Reagan from simply running away.
You're not that intimidating. I don't mean to say that to be rude, but this girl had plenty of chances to get the away from you. How'd you keep her there? How? I said all I wanted was the money and everything would be all right.
Goldsby first claims after getting $60 from the ATM, he forces Reagan to drive to the park. Once there, he orders her out of the car, makes her undress, then leaves her in the field.
Did you have sex with her girl? No. You sure? Positive.
But if she wasn't sexually assaulted, why make her undress?
Well, you left her out there in the cold naked. You don't see that's how that is?
That's when detectives tell Goldsby DNA found on Reagan's body is being tested.
Any of your DNA going to be any fatal response? No.
Goldsby insists he didn't sexually assault Reagan Tokes, and he didn't kill her.
Explain to him how she got shot in the head.
How do you want me to explain that?
When's the last time you shot her?
I never shot her.
That's when detectives leave the room to devise a new strategy. After a couple of minutes, one returns and insists Goldsby must have had an accomplice.
Is there a second person? Why y'all lying to me now? Because it's not gonna make it. You haven't lied at all night. It does make a difference. I want to know.
The suggestion that someone else may have been involved was suddenly very appealing, and Goldsby's story quickly takes a dramatic turn.
Well, it makes a difference. Dude. Kids ain't gonna die. We can look out for them.
Goldsby now claims a man named TJ had been demanding money from him. He says if he didn't come up with the cash, TJ would harm his kids.
Whose idea was it to go get the girl? It wasn't to specifically get a specific person. To get money. Yes.
Goldsby tells detectives after he abducted and robbed Reagan, he thought they'd let her go. But then TJ forced him to rape her at gunpoint. Goldsby claims he was as terrified as Reagan herself.
I wanted to just run and call the cops. For real. I could have. But at the same time, I didn't want to put my baby in jeopardy.
After getting to the park, he says TJ made Reagan undress, and then he shot her twice in the head.
I'm like, bro, what is she doing, bro? You said just gonna let her go. He's like, bro, shut up.
The detective pretends to believe every bit of Goldsby's story.
I believe you. You're gonna help me find TJ.
But in fact, they already knew he was lying.
There was no TJ.
There's no TJ.
It was all a ruse to get more information out of him, and it worked. Because Goldsby thought cops bought his accomplice story. He pointed them right to all the evidence.
Where's your clothes at? They're in the alley. I have one.
And her cell phone?
Silver phone. Where you from? And some bushes.
He even pointed them right to the murder weapon.
The gun was inside of a storm sewer. We found 2 spent casings inside another sewer grate.
Detectives now had plenty of evidence linking Brian Goldsby to the murder of Reagan Tokes, but they were about to have even more. Compliments of something he was wearing at the time of his arrest.
He did have a GPS ankle monitor on him.
Brian Goldsby was on the hot seat under arrest and facing tough questions about the kidnap, rape, and murder of Reagan Tokes.
I ain't shooting nobody, man.
But the convicted sex offender blamed it on someone else.
His story at the end of everything was that TJ made him rape her at gunpoint, and that TJ was the one that shot her.
But cops already had plenty of evidence suggesting otherwise, and they were about to have a whole lot more. At the time of Reagan Tokes' murder, Brian Goldsby was wearing a court-ordered GPS ankle monitor because of a prior violent offense.
We all think that the monitor on his ankle is somehow going to keep us safer from the criminal, but it doesn't work that way.
No.
Brian Goldsby's ankle monitor pinged his location every minute. However, no one was keeping track of the pings.
What's the point of electronic monitoring unless you're going to be able to detect conduct that isn't appropriate based on his terms?
If someone had been keeping tabs on Goldsby's ankle monitor, they may have known he regularly missed curfew, a parole violation that would have sent him back to prison.
What good is it after the fact? And what kind of a message are you sending to a violent felon who was released if they know they're wearing the ankle monitor and they break the rules associated to that and nothing happens?
Even more egregious, pings from Goldsby's ankle monitor placed him at the exact location of several violent robberies near campus in the weeks leading up to Reagan's murder, but no one noticed.
And if the parole people were putting 2 and 2 together, they could have seen that and perhaps arrested him.
Instead, on the night of February 8th, 2017, Brian Goldsby is seen getting on and off city buses in a busy part of town not far from the campus of Ohio State University.
This man was trolling the neighborhood looking for a victim.
At 7:49, he gets off the bus for the last time.
He was just walking up and down streets in the Short North area, which has a lot of restaurants, a lot of bars, a lot of nightlife.
Shortly after 9 o'clock, Reagan leaves the Bodega restaurant where she worked as a waitress. Walking to her car, their paths cross.
The GPS placed him right where she parked her car.
By his own admission, Goldsby forces Reagan into her car and they drive to an ATM. At 10:04, an attempt to withdraw $500 is declined. Then they go to another ATM, and again, the transaction is declined.
After that, they went to an alley where they were stationary for about 12 minutes, and that's where we believe that she was raped.
The DNA swabs we took from him showed that the semen that was removed from Ms. Tokes was a match to him.
At 10:32, they return to the first ATM and Reagan withdraws $60.
They leave that area and they drive around and return back to the Bodega bar, where they are there for a few minutes.
Goldsby tells cops he returned to pick up some of his belongings that he had stashed in an alley.
But at this point, though, I'm sure everything would have been closed, so there wouldn't have been anybody to help her.
Well, it was the area that they went back to. It was an alley. It was just behind the bar area.
After driving around a bit more, cops say it appears the two were heading to the park where Reagan's body was found when they suddenly make a U-turn.
The GPS turns around and heads back north to Stringtown Road, and they end up at a gas station.
And what happens there?
The video there is very poor again, and you can see someone getting out and pumping gas into the car.
At 11:43, Reagan's car pulls out of the gas station parking lot. Her next stop would be her last. According to Goldsby's ankle monitor, they drive to that nearby park. He's there for only 3 minutes. Grove City Detective Rick Fournay tells us what investigators believe happened in the park.
What happened in those 3 minutes?
In those 3 minutes, he made her take off all her clothes, marched her out to the field, shot her in the back of the head.
It's awful.
It was terrible.
Did he share anything about what Reagan said or anything like that?
He did. He said that one of her last words, she told him, "I just want to live."
After leaving the park, Goldsby is seen on security video at 12:18 buying a gas can at a Speedway gas station. The same gas can was found in Reagan's car 2 days later, just a few blocks from the group home where Goldsby lived. During his interrogation, Goldsby admits he tried burning the car.
You could see some charred parts on the seat where he attempted to do that, but it was unsuccessful.
It was a most fortunate failure. If the car had caught fire, the cigarette butt which led to his arrest likely would have never been found.
He's not a very good arsonist.
Brian Goldsby would ultimately stand trial on 9 counts, including aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, kidnapping, and rape.
Unless they present proof beyond a reasonable doubt, your verdict must be not guilty.
Goldsby didn't take the stand in his own defense, but a video of his interrogation was played for the jurors in which he claims someone named TJ killed Reagan.
He shoots her back in the head the first time. She falls. He shot her again when she landed on her gun. This is the first time I've ever seen somebody get killed in my whole life.
However, 3 witnesses testified that Goldsby told them he did have a gun the night Reagan was abducted.
I went to pick up the coat. It was heavy, and I knew it was heavy, so I was like, what's in here? And he said his gun was in there.
And the most damning testimony of the trial would come from Goldsby's girlfriend. Prosecutor Ron O'Brien reminds the jury what she said.
He finally told, who's the mother of his child, who's visiting him in the jail, that I did it. I killed that girl for her money. $60.
Goldsby's girlfriend also told jurors that on the night of the murder, he gave her the $60 he stole from Reagan, along with Reagan's Kate Spade purse, as a Valentine's Day gift.
Is that the purse that Mr. Goldsby gave you?
Yes, that's the purse.
Demented. I don't have any other words for it.
I can think of some, but I don't want to say them to you.
Detective Fournay says at the time, Goldsby's girlfriend had no idea where the purse came from.
She asked him, "Why are you giving me a purse that looked like it's been used?" And he said that's just how he wanted to give it to her.
With mounds of evidence against Brian Goldsby in the kidnapping, rape, and murder of Reagan Tokes, it took only 5 hours for jurors to reach their verdict. And it was unanimous.
We, the jury in this case, being duly impaneled and sworn, find the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
In the end, no one bought Goldsby's claim that someone else killed Reagan. He was convicted on all charges. 1 week later, the penalty phase of the trial began.
If there was ever a case that deserved the death penalty, I felt this was the one.
Before jurors decide between life and death, Goldsby addressed the court for the first time and confessed to the killing.
Today I would like to apologize to the Tokes family for the conduct committed against your daughter. When I first got locked up, I lied about everything. Said it was a TJ. There is no TJ. TJ's not real. I made it to jail because I was trying to wiggle my way out of the crime that I committed.
With Reagan Tokes' parents looking on, he then asked jurors to spare his life, something he had refused to do for Reagan.
The other thing I have to say is, please have mercy on me.
Did that just turn your stomach?
Yes, it did.
In the end, the jury did show Brian Goldsby mercy.
Life imprisonment without parole.
And Reagan's family erupts in tears. The two jurors who voted against the death penalty told prosecutors they were swayed after hearing about his childhood.
Were you disappointed that he didn't get the death penalty?
I won't say I was disappointed because that's not the kind of people we are. I can tell you I would have voted for it if I was sitting on that jury.
In addition to the life sentence for killing Reagan Tokes, Goldsby also received 66 years for a string of other violent robberies in the weeks prior to her death.
He ended up being charged with each of those robberies and pled guilty to those robberies after the homicide trial.
The same GPS ankle monitor that helped convict him of Reagan's murder also tied him to the attacks.
It placed him at the precise location of these street robberies.
But that was of little consolation to the Tokes family.
It's Reagan that lost the most, obviously, her life. She paid the ultimate price because the state of Ohio failed to properly monitor and control a very violent offender. Wearing a GPS bracelet.
My daughter could still be alive had it been monitored in real time because he should have been back in prison.
The Tokes decided to turn their outrage into action. Toby and Lisa leading the movement to change existing laws in Ohio.
Innocent victims are losing their lives because of the laws as they currently exist.
The Tokes have worked with lawmakers to come up with new legislation called the Reagan Tokes Act.
How familiar were you with the Reagan Tokes story before you met her parents?
Quite familiar.
One of the key components to the legislation allows for indeterminate sentences for violent offenders.
When Brian Goldsby was in prison, he was a terrible inmate. Violation after violation after violation over 6 years.
52 serious infractions in all. If the Reagan Tokes Act passes, prisoners who misbehave while locked up could get their sentence extended up to 1.5 times.
The data and evidence has found that the indefinite sentencing work to actually help rehabilitate these offenders because they are more incentivized to participate in programming and to not face longer prison terms.
Prosecutor Ron O'Brien says that alone could have saved Reagan's life.
He did 6 years on the attempted rape and robbery. That sentence would have been 6 to 9 under the proposal that passed the Senate, and very likely, given his misconduct in prison, he wouldn't have been released in November of 16.
Another key piece of the legislation involves more effective monitoring of ex-convicts wearing required GPS ankle monitors.
I have to admit, I always thought an ankle monitor, that means that's an extra layer of protection for us in the public.
One would think.
The Reagan Tokes Act would require real-time monitoring.
This is 2018. The technology exists.
The bill also requires reducing caseloads for parole officers, something that would likely cost taxpayers more money.
Do you think that money is going to be an issue?
I don't think you can put a price on public safety.
But politics, right?
This is about doing the right thing and protecting the people. If it costs money, we need to allocate the money to do it.
Do you have community support for this?
Overwhelming.
Absolutely.
That's because everyone in Ohio has been moved by Reagan Tokes' story, especially the investigators who worked so hard to bring her killer to justice.
How would you describe Reagan Tokes?
She was just a beautiful child. Yep.
And this is truly one of those I'm sorry. This case is very personal to you in this department.
Yes, it is. Yep.
On what was supposed to be Reagan's graduation day, more tears.
And the degree Bachelor of Arts upon Reagan Delaney Tokes.
It's always hard for a child to watch their parents struggle.
Most definitely. Parents should never have to bury their child, so I think it's just strange knowing that fact, that it's not my sister and I that are going to be here to take care of my parents after, it's just me.
How it's affected your family, because you do have another daughter, very close in age.
How do you not find the strength and the will and the energy to help her continue forward and pursue all the opportunities that life still has in store for her? And I would be hypocritical in my faith if I chose the alternative, which is to curl up in fear.
It's been a terrible loss. We loved Reagan with all our heart, and we miss her. It's very tough.